Things Golden Girls producers hid from fans. The Golden Girls was a hit show in the 80s. It was about a group of senior citizens. The show focused on 4 old ladies sharing a Florida house and often find themselves in weird situations. The cast of women were Broadway veterans and TV comedy legends, and the show lasted 7 seasons. Today it's in syndication and there are reruns every day. Even the theme song, "Thank You for Being a Friend," is still a hit today. You may think of Dorothy, Blanche, Sophia, and Rose as your friends, but there are things Golden Girls producers hid from fans. Estelle Getty had stage fright. Estelle Getty, who played Sophia, was the least experienced actress of the 4 ladies on the show. Due to her lack of experience, Estelle would get very nervous before each performance. The show was filmed with a live studio audience, and she was worried that the audience would know she was faking it, leaving her rattled and nervous before filming each episode. The set was recycled from another short-lived series. The Golden Girls kitchen set was first created for the show It Takes Two, starring Helen Hunt. The series ended after 1 season, and the kitchen set went to the Golden Girls. The wallpaper was changed to give it a more tropical theme because on the show the characters lived in Florida. Bea Arthur had very sore ears. Bea Arthur, who played Dorothy, and her ears often hurt after a long day of filming. The costume department wanted her to wear big earrings, but her ears weren't pierced, so they used clip-ons. After a long day of clip-on earrings hanging from her ears, she was in a lot of pain by the time filming wrapped for the day. Rue McClanahan got to keep her wardrobe. Rue McClanahan played Blanche on the show. She knew she'd go through numerous outfits on the show, so Rue had it written in her contract that she could keep Blanche's wardrobe. She was the only cast member with this clause in her contract, and after several seasons, she ended up with a significant amount of clothes. They originally wanted a butler in the show. The pilot episode was a lot different than the rest of the series. One difference is that there was a maid and personal chef in the pilot, but the character was cut before filming season 1. The writers realized that many scenes took place in the kitchen, and having a chef in each scene would be too distracting. Some people believe that the character's homosexuality played a part in the character being cut from the rest of the series. The show was controversial at times. It's not uncommon for TV shows today to talk about gay marriage, abortion, and sex, but in the 80s, these topics were very controversial. The writers didn't care about pushing the envelope, and the dialogue and storylines made the show far ahead of its time. The show covered many touchy subjects that most TV shows in the 80s wouldn't attempt. They had different roles in the beginning. Before the pilot was shot, Betty White, who played Rose, was cast to play Blanche, and Rue McClanahan, who played Blanche, was cast as Rose. Before filming began, the actresses agreed to switch roles to play parts they weren't used to make things more interesting and challenging. It's a good thing they made the switch because it's hard to imagine any other actresses playing Blanche and Rose. Bea Arthur didn't always get along with the other ladies. Bea Arthur was known as a difficult actress to work with, which was true on the Golden Girls set. At one point or another, every woman on the show had issues with Bea, especially Betty White. In 2011, she admitted that Bea wasn't fond of her and found her to be sometimes a pain in the neck. Betty believed her positive attitude annoyed Bea, and if Rose was happy, Bea was furious. Bea Arthur was a civil rights activist. Although Bea could be difficult at times and caused problems on the set of the Golden Girls, she was very passionate about her off-screen work. Bea was a vocal supporter of elderly, Jewish, and LGBTQ rights and helped the homeless. After Bea died, she donated a lot of money to the homeless LGBTQ youth. Bea was also an animal lover and advocated for animal rights and was a member of People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, PETA. Betty White was an animal lover. Betty White and Bea Arthur didn't always agree on set, but they were both animal lovers. Like Bea, Betty was an animal rights activist, and they bonded over their love of animals and the need to protect them. Betty White holds a Guinness World Record. Betty White holds a Guinness World Record for the longest television career. She made her debut in 1939, and her career spanned over 82 years until she died on December 21st, 2021. She'll likely remain the record holder for quite some time. Estelle Getty was younger than Bea Arthur. Estelle Getty played Sophia, who was Dorothy's mother, played by Bea Arthur. Although Estelle played Bea's mother, she was younger than Bea. Estelle was born on July 25, 1923, and Bea was born on May 12, 1922. It's incredible what they could do with makeup to make Estelle look decades older than Bea. Estelle Getty was also an activist. We already know that Bea Arthur and Betty White were activists, and Estelle Getty was also. After losing her gay nephew to AIDS, Estelle started raising money for AIDS research, and she was a major fundraiser. Betty White loved game shows. Betty White would play word games with her co-stars in between takes on the Golden Girls. She always loved games and appeared on many game shows in the 1950s and 1960s. Betty met her future husband, Alan Ludden, on Password, set in 1961. Rue McClanahan became infected with Betty's love of the game show Password, and the two would occasionally spend an entire day playing the game between takes. Estelle Getty had a facelift. Estelle Getty was the second youngest character in real life, and the makeup department had to make her look like the oldest cast member. When the show went on hiatus after filming a season, Estelle got a facelift to make her look younger. Surgery was set for her self-esteem, but the makeup department had to work even harder to make her look old enough to be Dorothy's mother. The show was a huge hit. The Golden Girls was on the air for 7 series, and the show received 68 Emmy nominations. In 1986 and 1987, they won the award for Outstanding Comedy Series, proving to everyone that The Golden Girls was the show to watch. The cast was nominated as well. The show received plenty of Emmy nominations and even won twice, and the actresses were also recognized for their performances. Estelle Getty and Betty White received 7 nominations each, and Bea Arthur and Rue McClanahan each received 4. In total, the show won 11 Emmy Awards. Betty White was the last surviving cast member. Betty White lived the longest of all her co-stars. Estelle Getty died in 2008 from Lewy body dementia. In 2009, Bea Arthur died of cancer, and Rue McClanahan died of a brain hemorrhage in 2010. Betty White outlived her co-stars, died 12 years after Rue, and died in her sleep on December 31st, 2021 in her Brentwood home. She suffered a stroke on Christmas Day, which was the cause of her death. The actress was 99 years old when she died. The Queen Mother was a huge fan of the Golden Girls. The Queen Mother loved the Golden Girls so much that she invited the cast to England to perform in 1988. Queen Elizabeth II's mother invited the cast to her country, and they couldn't refuse. All 4 women traveled to England and put on a stage performance for the royal family, which the ladies called the opportunity of a lifetime. Bea Arthur hated cheesecake. Cheesecake was the go-to dessert on the Golden Girls. Throughout the show's 7 seasons, hundreds of slices of cheesecake were eaten on the show. When the show ended, Bea Arthur revealed she didn't like the dessert. You'd think the producers would have chosen a go-to dessert that all cast members enjoyed. Instead, Bea Arthur had to eat cheesecake, even though she didn't like it. Betty White spoke gibberish. Rose was supposed to be able to speak Norwegian, and in one scene she had to speak Norwegian. Betty White can't speak Norwegian in real life, so when her character had to, Betty just sang a bunch of gibberish with an accent. The audience had no idea she was speaking nonsense. Bea Arthur almost turned down the role. Bea Arthur almost turned down the role of Dorothy. She was worried that the parts she, Rue McClanahan, and Betty White were going to play roles that they were too similar to their roles on Maude and the Mary Tyler Moore Show. She believed the show would fail. It wasn't until Betty and Rue decided to switch roles that Bea got on board to play Dorothy. Betty White was the oldest cast member. On The Golden Girls, Rose was the youngest of the 4 women. In real life, Betty was the oldest of the 4 women. She was born on January 17, 1922, and despite being the oldest, she lived the longest. Betty died 18 days away from her 100th birthday on December 31st, 2021. The kitchen had 1 table and 3 chairs. 4 leading women were on the show, but the kitchen only had 3 chairs around the table. The producers didn't want the characters' backs to the camera, so the 4th chair was removed. If a scene called for all 4 women to sit around the table, a stool was brought in and pulled up behind the chairs so they were always facing the camera. Winning an Emmy. As mentioned earlier, every lady on The Golden Girls won an Emmy. This is uncommon in Hollywood and happened in just 2 other shows. Every main character in All in the Family and Will and Grace won an Emmy. These were the only 3 shows in television history to do so. There was real-life inspiration. NBC producer Brandon Tartikoff got the idea for the show while visiting his aunt. His aunt's neighbor stopped by, who was around the same age, and the women bickered constantly. but Brandon could tell they loved each other and shared a special connection. By the time Brandon headed home, the idea for the Golden Girls was born, and the rest is history. Blanche's name changed. Blanche's full name was revealed in the episode Wham Bam Thank You Mammy, and her full name was Blanche Marie Hollinsworth. However, in a later episode, her name was Blanche Elizabeth Devereaux. Nobody on the show gave a reason for the name change, which was always a mystery. Changes had to be made. Michael Eisner, the Disney president, loved the idea for the show, but he wanted changes before giving the show the go-ahead. Michael wanted a younger female to broaden the show's appeal, so the writers went back to work. They added Sophia first, and then Dorothy, and the Golden Girls was given the go-ahead shortly after, becoming one of the greatest 80s TV shows of all time. An international hit. The Golden Girls wasn't just a hit in the US, it was a beloved show in 60 other countries. Also, England, Russia, and Greece created their own versions of the show. Today, The Golden Girls still runs in syndication, and the entire series can be streamed on Hulu. Another World. In one episode of The Golden Girls, Blanche wanted to watch the soap opera Another World. Years before she starred in The Golden Girls, Rue McClanahan played Blanche on several episodes of the soap. The scene from The Golden Girls was a nod to Rue's longtime fans. Excellent ratings. An astonishing 25 million people tuned in to watch the first episode of The Golden Girls, and the numbers barely went down for 7 years. The show remained in the top 10 TV shows for ratings until the last season, when it dropped to number 30.